Okay, so this should wrap it up for today, and you'll still get out of here early in the end. But this then is the lesson that I mentioned that might very well be one of the most important concepts that I give you the entire 5 weeks. Consulting multiple sources. I'm sure that you've heard that before in News 105, in student media, what have you. So I would guess that you know that you should do it, but yet I find time and again instances where student media aside, it's even the pros that don't necessarily follow that, heed that advice. So I show you, yay, advertisements. All right, I show you this. Now, this is about 2 years old, and so it might be a little bit dated, but the point is not so much the percentage, it's just the general trend that I want you to zero in on. People in your own age cohort, your peers, don't trust you, aspiring news professionals. In general, 2 out of 3. That's not a good statistic, folks. And so, I mean, again, it says right in here, that almost 70, whoops, try that again. Almost 70%, 7 out of 10 of millennials would rather be the last to know rather than get inaccurate information. Now, they say that. I mean, I don't know if that's honestly truthful or not, but all we can go off of is what's there. So they would rather have accurate information than fast but inaccurate information on their smartphones, on their tablets, what have you. I mean, it says right here, 66%, there's that 2 out of 3, say that they're not confident in the news that they receive as being accurate. They actually prefer to have reporters older than they are. And again, that's a bit, well, I guess it's a bit reverse ageist, and the idea that people who are younger are less experienced. I mean, they are less experienced, but that doesn't mean that they're bad reporters or that they're less trustworthy. So, that could be flawed. Again, this is in general. And if you look, what is it? A study of 500 millennials. I mean, there's more than 500 millennials, more than 500 of you on this campus alone. So that's not a very big study. And so that's worth mentioning too. But, in any case, I bet if we looked more deeply into it, we could find a lot of sources that say that people in general are distrustworthy of the news. And why? Well, here's the lineup right here. Here are all your examples why. So I'll get to the Paterno thing in just a minute, but I'm going to show you a couple links that I've been pulling. And as I see these things, I save them, I drop them into Blackboard, and the whole idea is to make an example of some of the pros, because I could pick on student media, but why do that? It's even better when I can find examples where the pros went wrong. And I want you to learn from these folks. I want you to learn from them and not repeat the same mistake. So here was an example where CNN fired an editor for plagiarism found in 50 published stories. Plagiarism. You know what that is. That's taking somebody else's work and passing it off as your own. And so, I mean, I could read all this, but I'm not going to, and that's why it's linked in there. And you should have access to this. So I don't know if any of you are logged into Blackboard right now, and if you're not, that's fine. Just pay attention to what's going on up front on the screen. Here's another one where, in this case, it's Forbes chronicling advertisements. I suppose I shouldn't complain because that's what keeps news in existence, are these advertisements and the funding behind them. But here was one example where Forbes chronicled CNN's coverage of the Newtown massacre, and that was when a shooter went into the elementary school in Connecticut and shot dead 26, 27 kindergarten and first grade students. I mean, I don't know what the hell you could have against a 5 or 6 year old kid, but yeah, you know the tragedy. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And again, I mean, I'm not going to go through the entire article. I would leave that up to you. But what I will do is I will summarize this. And what Forbes is doing here is they're trying to get screen grabs. I mean, again, once you put something online, it doesn't matter if you go in later and say, "Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to retract it." Guess what? No. I mean, someone probably took a screen grab of that. It's forever there. And if your byline is associated with that, your name, in other words, is associated with that faulty information, guess what? You're forever associated with that inaccuracy. And that strikes right at the heart of your credibility as a professional. So that's why this is the most important lesson for you. What they did, CNN jumped the gun. Obviously the tragedy broke. It's breaking news. This was back in December 2012, so we're approaching the 3-year anniversary of that tragedy. And what they did, they knew it was a male shooter, but they got it wrong. They picked the brother. So it wasn't the perpetrator that we now know as Adam Lanza. What they did was they thought it was his brother Ryan. And so he was getting phone calls at work, asking, why the hell did you walk into a school and shoot up all these kids? And he's sitting there and saying, what the hell? Oh, here it is. That just worked out well with me scrolling. So Ryan, the brother, I don't think I need to repeat that. I think it's right there for you. But yeah, this was a screenshot of his feed, and clearly he's not exactly happy about that. And can you wonder why? First of all, not only did Adam Lanza shoot up that school, killing teachers, principals, students, young children, but he also shot and killed their mother. So here's a guy, the brother that is, who has a sibling who just committed a mass tragedy, will forever live in infamy, and on the same day he also lost his mother. That's a pretty shitty day, no matter how you look at that. And then to have a major news media blame you, target you as being the perpetrator, you can see how that's a pretty grave mistake. I'm just going to say it. That's a pretty major fuck up. That's what that is. And I'm sorry, that's inexcusable. You need to check your facts, and CNN didn't do it. Now, here's another one, NPR. Now, you'll notice I'm intentionally not trying to go for Fox. I'm not trying to go for MSNBC. I don't want the polar partisan media. I'm trying to go for ones that are considered reputable. So I'm going to tell you right now that just saying, oh, NPR, that's a reputable news source. Of course it's credible. Oh, New York Times, that's a widely circulated prominent newspaper, that's been around for some time. A lot of strong reporters work there. I mean, it's not like you can graduate with your bachelor's degree and just go to New York and start working for the Times, so it must be credible. No, you cannot go off of that. That is laziness. That is laziness. And I tell you, you roll the dice. Sometimes you'll get lucky, and other times you're going to get burned. Here was an instance where NPR got burned. This was even before Newtown. This was with a representative named Gabrielle Giffords. This was when I was a PhD student at Utah, and so I remember this because that was in the neighborhood. This was in Arizona, and she was at a grocery store. She was meeting her constituents, and another male shooter opened fire at the grocery store. I think he killed, I thought he killed 9. Looking at this, it says 19 others had been shot. So maybe the others were injured, but off the top of my head, 9 rings a bell. And NPR erroneously reported that she, the congresswoman, had died. And again, I'm not going to scroll through all this and read line by line, but it breaks it down where they made their mistake. And I mean, that's NPR, National Public Radio. That's probably the least partisan media outlet I can think of these days. And, then just to give you one more example, I pull this from the Huffington Post. This was an interesting story because of what the reporter did. So the long story short is that the Department of Justice, that's what the DOJ is about over here, Department of Justice, once upon a time, had this conference. And it was in DC, and when anything that is done with taxpayer dollars is open to the public. That's kind of in a way where Freedom of Information Act comes into play. But nevertheless, it came out that these muffins that were served at breakfast at this conference were $16 a pop. They pulled the hotel invoice and it said muffins $16 each. So, of course, all the talking heads come out in mass and they start bitching and complaining about it. La 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 la. Oh, Senator. And I mean, it wasn't just Republicans either. It was Democrats. But heads will roll. Bill O'Reilly had his 2 cents, to say about it. Well, the problem is that when a reporter went back and looked at LexisNexis Academic, which is one of the databases that we'll talk about in this class, so a week's worth of mediated stories about Muffingate. I love how anytime there's a scandal, they always tack on the word gate to it, but Muffingate, as it became known, generated 223 stories in a week's time that had mentioned $16 muffin, $16 per muffin. He got it through a LexisNexis search of the transcripts. Of those 223, 178 did not fix the error in their reporting. What happened was, it was another reporter who actually called, imagine that, actually called the hotel and said, okay, can you explain this invoice? How in the hell could you have a muffin? Even Starbucks can't get away with charging them for $16 a pop. So how the hell did they do it? Turns out this was not just a muffin. That was just the shorthand that they used in the invoice. It actually was a full service omelet bar buffet style breakfast is what it was. And so you pay to have access to the entire buffet, all you can eat type of thing. That's what it was. Well, so finally a reporter actually did due diligence, called and found out, and so attempted to set the record straight. Well, what this reporter found was that in a week's time, 178 out of 223 stories didn't mention the hotel's response. In other words, they didn't do what they were supposed to do and investigate as a part of their reporting process. Only 37 stories actually offered an explanation of the whole word choice, muffin, in association with $16 a pop. So, I mean, if you did some quick math, 178 divided by 223. Folks, that's damn near 80%. In a week's time of reporting on this scandal, this supposed scandal, 4 out of 5 stories didn't have anything about the hotel response. The fact that it was a full, I mean, and you could argue whether $16 is an appropriate price for a buffet, but it makes a little bit more sense that it's $16 a person then as opposed to $16 per muffin. I mean, that is another good example of poor reporting. And in this case, someone actually tried to get some statistics to show just how poor the media handled this. What it boils down to is laziness. And that's what I'm trying to prevent in you. And doing that by showing you examples. I could talk till I'm blue in the face. Oh, point a finger at you, and it's probably going to be even bigger because it's on a screen. Check your sources, use multiple sources, la 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 la. You know that. You've heard that before. So why not let the examples speak for themselves? And Joe Paterno, some of you in here know who that is. Others may not. Joe Paterno was a famous Penn State football coach. Geez, the man coached at Penn State for over 50 years, if I'm not mistaken, on some level. And, well, anyway, there was the whole Penn State scandal, and that affected his health. I mean, he was an old man to begin with. He was in his 80s and still coaching collegiate football. Well, when it came time to announce his death, what happened was the Penn State News, so this would be the equivalent to our daily news, first reported his death at 8:45 p.m., and they cited an email. Notice there, the an email, one email that was sent to football players. And look at what they tweeted. Our sources, interesting that they use the word plural there, sources can now confirm that Paterno had passed away. This is a prominent figure. This isn't some, everyday Joe or Jane walking down the street. This is somebody that has real prominence in that community. And so what happened was the local radio station picked up on it, and then on the national level, CBS Sports had published an obituary. So I told you, things live on the internet years after it's first posted. Huffington Post also published prematurely about Joe Paterno dying, and that was based off of the student email. So what happened was the student media website crashed, and then what happened was a Paterno spokesperson talked to somebody from the New York Times who said, yeah, Joe's still alive. I mean, he may not be doing well, but he's still kicking. So what the hell? And so what happened was, remember, if I scroll back up, but I'll just tell you, it was 8:45 that night when the Penn State Daily News posted this. 45 minutes later, the student outlet apologized, saying that they were wrong. So this didn't take long. 45 minutes for national outlets to pick up on it, report on it, and then to have the retraction from student media. And if I were to click on this, but I'm running out of time, so I won't. I mean, I got to tell you, someone fell on the axe, and it was the editor at the student paper for erroneously publishing information that was proven false about a prominent figure, nonetheless. So, I've got a couple other links in here, but I'm running out of time. In fact, I have just a few seconds. But the bottom line, folks, have multiple sources confirm whatever fact it is that you're trying to present. and I'll see you next week.